Okay, we're going to get started, ladies and gentlemen, with your permission. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We're immersing ourselves in the words of Torah. And I want to begin with a little tefillah, which is chanted, sung in the mornings in many synagogues. I don't know if it's chanted here, particularly on days when the Torah is read midweek, which is, of course, Monday and Thursday. Everybody knows that because those were market days in antiquity. Yeah, we have lots of other holidays in which it was read. That's true, but the standard days, weekdays that were read, there are these series of prayers called Yehi Ratzon. Anybody know what Yehi Ratzon means?
So
It should be your will.
Yeah, may it be God's will. Yehi Ratzon, right? It should be God's will. And then there are a series of Yehi Ratzon. And one of them is Yehi Ratzon, right? Milfanecha, in front of you or before you. God, we should hear good things, right? Besorot tovot. We should hear good tidings, I guess it is. And then it moves into a prayer called Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael. Our children, right? Our brothers and sisters who are the house of Israel, wherever they are, whether they're on land or sea, whether they're in good situations, whether they're in bad situations, we pray that God will what? Will protect them and take them from narrow places to expansive places, from difficulty to joy, all the words that we can use. So it's a wonderful little melody. We'll sing it together and it'll be kind of the Vorspeise, the little appetizer for our learning of Torah today. And in and of itself, it's a beautiful little tefillah. And I hope and pray that God will deliver us from subjugation to redemption, from darkness to light. Yeah? Achayenu kol Beit Yisrael. Achayenu kol Beit Yisrael. Anetuni b'tzara u'b'shivia, omnim bein bayam u'bein bayabasha. Hamakom yerachem aleichem ve'yotzim mitzara, li'revacha u'me'afel le'ora, shibo ye'olashta b'gala u'mizmachari. Hamakom yerachem aleichem ve'yotzim mitzara, li'revacha Hopefully that lifts your souls a little bit and the prayer's words will come true and all those who are living in difficulty will be set free and everybody will feel a sense of menschlichkeit, of humanity, the humanity of ourselves and the humanity of others. So Boker Tov, good morning. It's nice to see you. You know, I've missed teaching Torah here in a few weeks, so I'm glad to be back with you. I was told that I'm teaching something called the Think Incubator on Tuesday night. Somehow it was germinated here in this synagogue as well. All good things come back to Bnei Yeshurun, I guess. And then Rabbi Hal asked me to teach a 3-part class later on into the spring, which I'll do. Will be in the evening, so you'll get a chance to hear a little more Torah from me. I tried to shul around a little bit. I go to the different conservative synagogues to be able to teach, to get to know the people, but we're all part of one wonderful community. And by the way, I will sing with you anytime. Your beautiful voice. So thank you for sharing your wonderful voice.
Your name is Sierra too. There you go.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm here. Okay. So, you always have good intentions in mind. Yeah. So this morning, we're going to look a little bit at the parasha, okay? And there's so much about this parasha that we could talk about. I sent you some materials. I don't know if people saw it in advance. If you did, if you didn't, it's good. But I want to start with my very cute introduction to you. If you don't have the materials in front of you, it's my apologies. I hope you're able to access them. They were available online as well.
The link was in the emails this week.
The link was in the email. So if you
Both
click
the
on it-
Friday one and the earlier one in the week.
So we call this the Torah Cafe. That's your name for this wonderful session. I hope you had some cafe because there was some over there. A warm bagel also over there if you want as well. But I started the description, and for those who don't have the text in front of them, I want to show you what we did here. Why does our Torah use the term hardening of the heart to describe what happens to Pharaoh, the Pharaoh of Egypt, during the plagues, right? Some insights from, and you can see how I spelled from, for those of you who read later on, you see it's from Eric from, okay, very good. That's kind of cutesy, right? From here and from there, from, F-R-O-M-M, Eric from, who was a Gitta Yid. He was a good Jewish guy, lived around the year 1900. Interesting person, psychotherapist. We'll get there in just a moment. But before we get to that, we have to give ourselves a little bit of context, okay? So if you have your Chumash, why don't you open the Bible to chapter 10, page 374 of the book of Exodus. By the way, Shmot. By the way, they edited my piece. If you did see in the Jewish paper this week, they instead of I put it in Hebrew, I put Shmot, and they translated it as numbers. So we're not reading the book of Numbers, we're reading the book of Exodus.
That's okay. One week they had the Haftorah was Matthew.
Okay. So I thank the editor very much for editing the piece, but I asked him next time, make sure it's the correct book of the Torah instead of any book there. But because Parashat Bo doesn't appear in the book of Numbers, it appears in the book of Exodus. But all that being said, important. And I want to make sure to share with you something that you already know, okay? The name of the Torah portion is Bo, okay? And where do we get the name Bo?
It was my neighbor's dog.
Okay, it was his neighbor's dog. Where do we get the, but where do we get the word from? Why do they call it Parshas Bo? Why do they call it the Torah?
It's the fifth word of the Parsha.
Okay,
And the first
so
one, not
the
the
Rebbitzin
first.
says it's the first word. She's right and she's also wrong.
It's the first uncommon.
It's the fourth
it's a-
word, but the other words are all, we'd have every
Okay.
chapter, the,
So could I try to distill it in the following way? It is the first consequential word, right? Important word for our purposes. And the Torah portions themselves often will start with the first word of the Torah portion, right? Bereshit is called, Torah portion is called Bereshit. It happens to be the first word. Bereshit means in the beginning God created, right? It's the first word and it's consequential. But sometimes, like in our parsha, Vayomer Adonai El Moshe Bo. It's the fifth word, or if it's a compound word, the word before, it's the fourth word. And so the notion of Bo, maybe we can close that door. Bo comes from the notion of what's important. It wants to what? It wants to locate you in a story, in the midst of a conversation or in the midst of a telling of a tale. And so Bo comes to tell you that you should look at that word. It's something important about that word, okay? And that's why they named it. Now, it's interesting to go through the Torah portions to see if it works exactly the way that I've said. And the answer is it doesn't work that way. Good morning. Sometimes it works that what? It's Bo because it's the first word. But most of the time, it's also a consequential word, okay? Everybody got that?
Yeah, so
So-
is it come or go?
Well, so stop for 1 second because you're jumping ahead, right? No, it's good, it's good. So when we think about the word Bo, you ask, what does it mean? Right? Because normally in Hebrew, when you say to your kid in modern Hebrew, Bo hena, which means come here, it means come, right? But here, Bo could also mean go, like in Yiddish, geh gesund, like get out of here, right? So Bo el paro, go to, come to, it's complicated. And by the way, on the sheet that I gave you, you can take a look at what's so interesting for me, right? The use of syntax, the use of particular words in Hebrew is very meaningful. In and of itself, Hebrew is a language with far fewer words than English. Did you know that? English has many, many, many more words than Hebrew, particularly biblical Hebrew. And by the way, that's why it's a relatively easy, I say that easy, a language to learn. Because in order to master the language, you only need X number of words. Like, start with me, right? How many people speak another language? Okay, very good. Anybody speak Chinese? Not that one. Okay, very good. How many people speak Portuguese? Like nobody here speaks Portuguese. Do you know any words in Portuguese? Right. So if you didn't speak Hebrew and somebody asks you, a teacher asks you, do you speak any other language? You say Hebrew, you say, I do. Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech, Haolam, Hamoitzi, Lechem, Min Haaretz, right? That's a bunch of words. Or Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbos, Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah. You know a lot of Hebrew, right? A lot of words. Most of them are brachas, okay? But you know a lot of Hebrew words and you have a general sense of what they mean. Yes, please.
Someone
Tell my
said-
African American.
Hold on one second,
I
yeah.
tell my African American students, they speak Hebrew and they say, what are you talking about?
Right?
And I say, did you ever say amen or hallelujah?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, in church. You speak Hebrew.
Yeah, that's very good. So the Hebrew is everywhere. Rebbitzin, you wanted to say something?
They said that I think if you learn 220 sort of roots, you know everything in the tefillot. You can translate anything in the tefillot.
Right. And one of our problems, by the way, I think in teaching Hebrew is we sort of relied on that. We thought we could teach people Hebrew simply by teaching them the Siddur. Now, we ended up teaching some good stuff about the Siddur. We didn't really give people to become facile in speaking Hebrew, right? They didn't go and be able to talk to their neighbor. Oh, how are you? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'melech. Oh, I'm just fine. Like that wasn't the language that we taught because there was a big, compensator, everything is okay. But the truth of the matter is we were stuck between models. We want to teach people how to be facile in prayer, or do we want to teach people how to be facile in language? P.S. Let me say the following. If you want to be a literate Jew, the answer is both. Both. You have to know a little bit. You have to know a little bit of language because you can't communicate otherwise. You can't appreciate some of the depth. And one of the examples is here, right? When it says, Vayomer Adonai El Moshe, we're on page 374, right? Bo El Paro, go. Come, go, whatever. We don't know exactly what word to use here. Ki ani hichbadati et libo ve'et lev avadav, because I have hardened his heart and the heart of his courtiers, right? For what reason? Leman shiti ototai ele bekubo. So that I can do what? I can manifest many miracles and signs in the midst of these people. So take that sentence onto itself and answer the following question.
Why?
Oi,
Why?
wait a minute, why? And isn't it problematic?
Yeah.
In other words, I am setting the Pharaoh of Egypt up to do what?
Fail.
To fail, to be punished. What other words might you use? Right? He's falling in a trap. In other words, and it's a trap that I, God, am acknowledging that what? That I actually set for the children, for Pharaoh, so that what? So that I can demonstrate my power, my majesty, right? Who I am and my signs and miracles amongst the Egyptian people. In other words, the Egyptians become what? Bit players in a movie that's not their own, or not just bit players. They become consequential players in a reality that maybe had they chosen to go in a different direction by their own volition, might have turned out very differently and might have what led to far less problems, far less suffering. In fact, it might have led to a release of the Israelites from bondage without all of the pyrotechnics that we ultimately see here, and without the chastisements and punishments which are wrought down upon the Egyptian people. And if that doesn't disturb you from some kind of ethical position, then I wonder a little bit about you. I do. Now, there are lots of answers and we can come up with them. And I bet if I went around the room, you come up with all the answers and better ones that I have.
I don't want to go there, but
Well, you're going to.
I'm heading there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about modern day, what's going on right now. Palestinians are the ones that are suffering, not Hamas.
Right. And so the question becomes, whose responsibility? And I could go through all the justifications, right? Because the Palestinians, even if they're not members of Hamas, know about Hamas and they know what Hamas is doing and they took many benefits. Remember that Hamas did some good things. The reason that Hamas came to power in part is because why? They were
Because we
elected.
gave them money.
Okay, great. So it's our fault. I don't want to take full responsibility, but I'll share it with you, Rebbitzin, okay? So the truth of the matter is that nothing doesn't come from nothing, right? There are limiting factors in some way, but there are also justifications for why things happen, right?
So
Go back to your comments.
So going back to Torah,
Yeah,
that's why the Egyptians have to suffer, because they didn't stop the Pharaoh.
okay. So they had lots of chances, you're saying. It was a lot of years of servitude. By the way, the tradition says it was 400 years plus of servitude. If you look at the Torah itself, it's only 240 years, but one way or another, it's a long time, right? It's a long time. And so what didn't happen? The children of Israel didn't really do what? They didn't really cry out to God. They didn't really try to manumit themselves. They didn't try to get themselves released. They didn't organize themselves against the Pharaoh. They simply went with what? What was going on. And on some level, there'll be lots of commentaries about what? About the fact, both on the Egyptian side as well as on the Israelite side, that what? When you head down a particular road, once you go to a point, there is a point of no return. You have crossed across a threshold and you've gone too far. And that's one of the justifications here, right? God, I see there's a comment. I see just 1 second. God ultimately does what hardens the Pharaoh's heart, but it doesn't start there. It starts after the opportunity to have simply said, you are God. I understand who you are. I understand your power, and I'm going to heed your call for the liberation of my people. And at a certain point, we go down that rabbit hole and there is a point of no return. Okay, comment from above.
Yeah, it actually, the 400 years of slavery, I believe, is calculated because it began at the time of Joseph.
Right.
That was the beginning of slavery for the Hebrews. If you remember, when they took Jacob's body back to Canaan,
right,
the Pharaoh insisted that they keep that the women and children remain.
Right. You've been reading your Bible very carefully. And by the way, the good thing about your close reading is that you're a close reader and you're finding things out. The bad part of being such a close reader is that this story will change many times. And they'll get lots of different rabbinic interpretations as to how long actually the children of Israel were there, why they were there, all the other things that we can add to all of this. But let's not get into the fine points of the math here. Let's understand that they were there for a long period of time. And let's go back to the notion that I want to talk about for a moment is the notion of the hardening of the heart, but we have a question.
One thing I don't want to get into, which bothers me, is that I think it's
You don't want to go, right? You don't want to go, and I don't want to go.
The last sentence is, God's being a little egotistical in my mind, saying that I'm going to hide his heart so I can show them what I can do. Can't he show them what he can do without all the suffering?
So, I mean, I think that's if God is God, why couldn't have God said bibbidi bobbidi boo, right? Everybody smile, manna falls from the heavens, everybody eats a little manna, their eyes open up, and what? And they all say, let's get together and be all right. You're like, why can we not have peace?
His
Right.
power without all this.
Yes, the longer I live, the longer I come to the realization that the best way and the most powerful way, really, for people to get along is in peace. All right, for people to live together, it's much easier for people to fight with one another. It is. The truth of the matter is it's much easier for us. We know this, by the way, even physiologically. You know, it's easier to smile than it is to frown. And yet people what? People will often frown. People do not smile quickly often. And there are a lot of reasons for it. Maybe it's your own bitterness. Maybe you've had a difficult life. Maybe your mother wasn't good to you, your father wasn't good to you, your children weren't good to you, your grandchildren. Whatever the reasons are, people have reasons for it. Yet the default often is to be fabissina, to be, what's fabissina in English? I was going to say, what's fabissina in Yiddish, right? What's fabissina? To be bitter, right? To be like maror, to have faces of maror. Right. By the way, we imbibe the maror on Pesach to what? To elicit. In other words, what's the standard operating procedure? Happiness or goodness, not sadness and bitterness. And yet many of us default to bitterness. So I think there's a lot of problems in this text and a lot that we need to think about. Okay, but one of the things we understand is, and I think we understand, is the way the story gets told, or the way we want the story to be told, or the way the authors or the editors, or the way God wants the story to be, or the way Moses wanted. I'm going to give you all the possibilities, right? Is that what? That the children of Israel, right, were given an opportunity to be freed from Egypt, beyad chazakah, with a strong hand, right, an outstretched arm, and that's the way the story lays itself out, whether we like it or not. So let's go back now to the difference between Bo El Paro, come onto Pharaoh, right? Or, right, is it come onto Pharaoh or go onto Pharaoh, right? Vayomer Adonai El Moshe. God says to Moses, come on to Pharaoh. Some of you may have read my piece that I had in the Jews newspaper, right? So the whole notion of coming on to somebody, pardon me, I want to be careful. This is not common
Yeah.
language in America, that if you see them to come on to somebody, it's like to approach them inappropriately. That's not what I mean here, right? Please, I don't want to get it confused. But there is this notion here of what? Come with a certain kind of chutzpah, with a certain kind of audacity, right? It's come on to, don't be what?
Timid.
Gentle.
Don't be
Right.
timid. That's the word. Don't be timid. Don't be afraid.
Right.
Bo el paro.
Are you, was it your article? I
Maybe
was
come
reading or
on is
something
the
else?
right thing.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
come
is.
on
It-
is really,
Yeah, but I don't want to go to the place of the
I know, I
sexuality.
understand,
Yeah.
I
And-
understand.
I don't
But
know.
in
Hold on,
other
we got a
words,
lot of
there's
comments.
a
We got a-
hardness.
Yeah,
There's a
there's,
hardness.
right, Reverend, I think you're right. I think that's exactly what the text wants to do. It is an act of audacity, which requires what? Gumption. And I think hardness is the right word. And by the way, why is it hardness? Because what's the other part of the verse? Ki ani hechbadati et libo. It's a hard heart, right? And so what's happening here is actually the hardening of the heart of Pharaoh is in some ways what's happening on the other side too. It's an equal and opposite. There's a hardening. And by the way, Moses says to Moses, God says to Moses, you got to get tough. You got to harden yourself. You got to become a little bit callous to what's going on so that what? You can meet the callousness from that side with the appropriate callousness on this side. And by the way, we all know that that's the reality. Look, think about it. How often have you been with somebody and they're coming at you, literally? They're very angry with you, right? There are lots of ways in which you can diffuse things, right? What would you do?
Say something positive about them.
Well, it would be very nice. Oh, I love your tie. That might work. Well, I didn't wear one today. Okay, but you might say something complimentary that switches the script, right? Or what else can you do?
Walk away.
Smile.
You can walk away. That's one way to diffuse. What else?
Validate
Validate. Somebody,
or meet it with equal strength.
or in this case, meet it with equal strength, which usually what? Does one of two things. Either creates conflict or creates, woo. You ever been with a bully? Bullies don't like to be bullied. Usually bullies are people who what? Have low self-esteem. Sometimes when you go at a bully, right? And you go at the bully strong, the bully kind of back down. I'll give you a great example. By the time I was ready to leave my congregation in New York, I had a last board meeting, which is a goodbye board meeting. And we had one guy on the board who we called devil's advocate. Why? Because every time he would say near the end of a meeting, after we almost had a resolution, he would say, what? I want to be the devil's advocate. That was every single meeting. And I was there for 5, almost 6 years. So we were sort of used to it. And we would joke about it. Everybody would joke about it, except him, because he took it very seriously. And he was about to speak and he said, and I would like to be the devil's advocate. And I said, stop. And I don't usually talk that way. And I said, stop, for God's sakes, for heaven's sakes, for one time, could you be the angel's advocate? And there was applause around the room, right? And there was silence and there was giggling and there was smiling. And then of course, I think we're going to miss you, Rabbi. Okay. But the truth of the matter is there are moments in time when you face fury with fury. And sometimes that can deflect the situation, deflate the situation, change the script. But if you look at all of this, it's interesting how we have the story here. When Moses is coming to Pharaoh, he's coming with what? Audacity, strength, chutzpah. He's kind of coming with gumption. And he's got both barrels sort of loaded. And who loads the barrels for him? God. He's on the word of God, right? Ki ani hechbadati et libo. I did this. Don't try to appease him anymore. Come on to him. Come strong. Come at him and do not demur. Okay, comments. Yes.
There is one, yeah,
Yeah.
me?
Okay, well, one at a time, or everybody speak at the same time. We can
Okay,
go.
I'll
All right,
speak at the
it's
same
very
time.
interesting that he is coming with his list.
He's coming with his.
His
Okay.
list and Aaron. So we were telling him to be very strong. I mean, this is an example for people today, which I have never heard expressed. But it
Right.
just occurred to me, you're talking about how strong he should be, how forceful, and yet one of his weaknesses is his list, or at least it would be I don't know.
You
it
know
may
that
not have
Moses
been
was
so
what they
much-
say in Hebrew, kvad peh, was heavy of mouth. Some people say he had a lisp, a speech impediment, maybe he just couldn't speak well. We don't exactly know what it is. By the way, isn't it interesting? The guy who can't speak
Isaiah.
well he has what, a whole book called?
A five-week monologue.
Not only a 5-week monologue, a whole book called Dvarim, which means words,
First.
right? There's words, Dvarim. All he does is talk, right? It's all Moses all the time. So I guess it overcomes his lisp or a speech impediment or a shyness or whatever. Okay, by the way, I think that's what's happening here. This, I think, is one of the liminal moments in the history of Moses. And it comes with what? With the backing of no better a backer than the Almighty, who says to him, go with strength. Do not any longer do what? Hide behind whatever it is that you think you're supposed to be hiding behind. And by the way, we'll see later in the story when the children of Israel are ultimately about to cross the Sea of Reeds. Anybody remember what happens?
They all demur.
Yeah, everybody demurs, including Moses. And God says to them, what? Don't cry out to me. March forward. Geh gesund. Get going. What are you waiting for? The time is now. And in and of itself, that's a very powerful notion. And there are these sort of cracks in the story or sort of seeds of this notion, which, by the way, are very powerful for us. And I'm sure that each one of us could talk about being very polite people and being kind people and being appropriate people and being genteel people. But aren't there moments in time when what? It is appropriate to simply say, genug is genug, enough is enough. This is not the way in which to proceed. And I wanted to speak about it only personally because I don't want to necessarily put anybody on the spot, but I bet we could go around. And there are moments when you've had enough. How about the car mechanic who your car comes back 3 times in a row and the car mechanic has charged you again and still hasn't done the work that you brought in for the first time? Okay, now you could give them credit and say maybe they discovered things they didn't see before. But I brought it in for the brakes. The brakes aren't fixed, and you've already charged me 3 times $900. Right? At a certain point, you stand up for yourself. I'm not saying that you should be rude, and I'm not saying you do it the first time. But I think at a certain point, higiu mayim ad nafesh, they say in Hebrew. The water has risen to your nostrils, to your soul almost, and you're going to die. There is a moment when the camel's back is broken. And in part, I think what's happening here in the Torah is that process of the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, which happens on God's command, but it's also the doing to Moses' heart. Hardening might be the right word, or let's say strengthening, right? You are giving him what it is that he needs in order to what? Fight fire with fire. And Moses, by the way, in the eyes of the Israelites, is going where? Where did he start? This was Pharaoh, this was Moses, right? And what's happening? There's a balance of power till what? Vayaminu ba'Adonai uv Moshe avdo. At the end of the song of the crossing of the sea, they believed in God and Moses, his servant. Vayaminu ba'Adonai uv Moshe avdo. That's the entire story of this part of the Exodus. It's what? It's creating belief in God and in the messengers of God. And I just want to make sure that we understand that that's the narrative that's happening here. It's the elevation of God in the eyes of the children of Israel and the diminution of the gods of Egypt in the eyes of the people of Israel. And that's called humbling, right? A humbling. And all of us in our lifetime have had experiences humbling, right? Often we're very secure in our ideas and then we find something out that's very humbling. And if we're really good people, what do? We check ourselves and say, whoops, we apologize for being so, demonstrative about our opinions. We understand that maybe there's a different way. And by the way, it's very hard with people like your own children or your grandchildren, right? Isn't it strange when your child actually gets it right or your grandchild gets it right? And do we have the ability to say what? Can we come quietly and say, you were really right? And by the way, when that happens between parents and children, it is one of the most beautiful things in the world. You know why? Because most of what your child actually knows, even the correctness of their position, is likely been taught to them by you. And then you have a realization, right? By the way, the Talmud has a great story, right? When God has an argument with a great rabbi, And he finally says, God finally says, Nitzchuni banai nitzchuni. My children have overcome me, my children have overcome, right? But is it sad when your
That's the
child
story
doesn't?
of somebody's stove, right?
Yeah, that's Achnai's stove.
Yeah.
Right, but the issue is it sad when your child is right? Is it sad when your child beats you in a foot race? Is it bad when your child knows to do math problems that you don't know how to do? Is it sad when your child knows how to use the machinkele that you have no idea how to use, but they go boom, 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 boom when it's all done? Right? It's actually wonderful. And if you are able to strip away your own ego around that, you actually say, wow, what a great miracle I have performed in that I taught my children and grandchildren how to fend for themselves. You know the miracle I'm waiting for? When the children get off the payroll, right? Then you say, Shechianu, V'kiyamanu, right? When they get off the payroll, sometimes takes a little longer than it used to take. But there is a moment in time when you look and you say, oh, God, did I ever tell you the story? Shimshon Novak was his name. A beautiful man. He had survived the Shoah, the Holocaust, by being a partisan, a kind of a freedom fighter in the forests, right? He was a tough guy. He was probably about 5'2", but he was a powerful guy, right? And he did okay for himself, and he had a son who I know, and he got very, very sick, mesothelioma, end of his life, is very sick, he's having a hard time. So his son said, Dad, come move in with me. So he moved in with them and he said, Rabbi, I want you to come visit me and my son's house. It's a very beautiful house. I want you to come see the house. Come to the house, 5,000 square feet. It's got an elevator, da, 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 da. And Shimshon says, I want to walk you around the house. I said, okay. I know it's a little hard for you to walk. He goes, no, I want to show you around the house. Show me around the house. We go up the elevator, down the elevator, up the elevator, down the elevator. It was so much fun. Anyhow, he says, come sit down. We were all tuckered out by walking around this big house. He sits down and he goes, what do you think of the house? I said, it's so beautiful. You must be so proud of your son. He goes, are you crazy? You know what I would have done? I would have taken this house and divided it into 8 lots and made a sachgeld and made a lot of money. He died like 2 days later. Okay. And when I talked to this, when I talked with the son afterwards, he says, that's a great story. That is really my dad. The truth is, my dad really didn't think that we needed this size house. And yet he built his son a house. He was very proud. You know, he had a space, he had an elevator, went up and down. So there's something about, the notion of what we think is valuable and important, and maybe what our children and grandchildren will think is important. But one way or another, the fact that people got to express themselves in a way that I think was both, chastisement and also grateful all at the same time. Okay, comment
also
there.
depends on the time.
Yeah, it depends on the time.
It reverses because once you lose some of the money, then you think again in terms of how to make the money.
Okay. You know what? These guys didn't need to think anymore about how making money. Their money was making money. So it was good. It was good. Okay. Yes, sir. Ivan, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. It's interesting here that God announces to Moses and Aaron right in front of Pharaoh and his servants that I am hardening Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
Right?
He said it in Hebrew, Ivan.
So
he said it in Hebrew. He didn't quite understand.
In Hebrew, right. But he says, I'm hardening his heart. Now, during the first few plagues, Pharaoh had free will.
Right. So you're heading to a classic rabbinic interpretation that says we all start with free will, and at a certain point we lose our free will when what? We go too far down into the abyss, and then there is no point. There's no point of return, right? You've missed that opportunity. That's one way in which to read all this. Right. By the way, you have a very cogent reading of the text. I just want to caution us all to be very careful about the way in which we read a text. It's good to read it one way one year, and then in the afternoon to read it again and come up with a different explanation, and then read it the next year. And by the way, that's Torah. If you think you have nailed what Torah is saying, likelihood is that you have not. Okay? Because every time you open this book again, you will notice something you didn't notice before, and it's set up in that fashion. A word is different, something sticks out at you. If you're musical and you hear a trope, that shit sets you off in a different direction. I'm going to be reading Torah in a little while. And I was looking through this morning and I saw a trope mark and it was very unclear and some vowels. And I asked Polly what it says. And it's interesting, right? It doesn't say tochlu, it says tochelu, which is an interesting thing. It changes the sense of the verse, right? There's a lot there and it can become very picayune or it can be very what? Very liberating. Because I am hearing Mr. Platt is finding himself in this story in a very strong way. And maybe others of us don't find ourselves so strongly in this text, or sometimes we recognize parts of ourselves that we don't like so much. Or maybe we want to say, that's them. Yeah, Anza, there's other people over there. And this is us, meaning us Jews or us people sitting in this room. And we create all kinds of tensions and we do what's a classic example of what happens in Jewish community, right? We have two sides to every argument. And then there's always somebody who says that, but I think you got the third story. And from Fiddler on the Roof, and you're also right? There is this notion of the complexity of opinions. P.S. I love that about Jewish tradition. And I love the fact that we can read the text one way this year and read it a different way next year. That's some of the greatest sermons you've ever heard, right?
Yes, but-
And by the way, just remember that we're always kissing the bride through the veil because most of us are not native Hebrew speakers. And if we're native Hebrew speakers, we're not native biblical Hebrew speakers. We are native, contemporary, or modern Hebrew speakers, which has a very different notion of what the word bo, for example, means. Bo el paro, right? We would not say these days bo, but we would say what? Lech el paro, but we said bo. And by the way, we have the word lech. You know where we see lech? Lech lecha, go, you shall surely go. It's not that they didn't know the word lech, but they chose bo here for a very particular reason. Okay, we got a lot of commentary. Hold on. Time out. Let's do one at a time because you can't all see each other. And we're going to start over here on my right side, and then I'm going to go down this way, and then I'm going to go to the screen. Yeah.
Rabbi, what you're saying is very, very energizing.
Yeah.
But the dilemma for me is I'm looking for the emes and I want to put on my Nike shoes and run when people say, here is the emes. How do you deal with this in terms of the fact that there are endless interpretations of this ancient language? We are brought up in a radically different culture.
Yeah.
We have our own background and experiences. How do you deal with all of this and come out feeling as though you have some substance?
That's a full course unto itself, but I'll say the following. Ultimately, in our lifetime, let me give you an example, okay? I married the most beautiful woman in the world. She was ordained from on high that we should meet each other, we should get married, and we should have a wonderful, right? It's because it was beshert, right? We say that. But let me ask you a question. Had I not gone to California and ended up there, right? I wouldn't have met Polly, right? There are certain things that happen. Now, you could say it was from above and God ordained it that I should meet, whatever it is. But we also know we make choices. And in the end, what you're going to do when you read a text of the Torah is you're going to make a choice. You're going to make a choice to how you want to read the text for this moment in time. The one thing that you're not going to do, I hope, is be arrogant enough to say that this is the exclusive and the only way to read. You know what that's called? That's called fundamentalism. And we have enough fundamentalism, generally speaking, coming from people who themselves have no idea what the original text meant, right? Did you ever hear a story of a virgin who gave birth to a little boy? You know what it says in Hebrew? It says a young woman gave birth to a little boy. Doesn't say that she was a virgin. A virgin in Hebrew is betula. You know it from the ketubah, betultada. It doesn't say betula, it says na'ah. And na'ah means a young woman. So an entire religion emerges from what we would call tot habocher hazetzer, from a person who was sitting and making a toast, making a mistake. A religion emerges. And so ask yourself the question, if you are not punctilious in the translation and the understanding of the text, right? Really be careful to the conclusions at which you arrive, because the consequence of those decisions could be fatal for you or another religion or turn the world upside down. And by the way, my own experience and my own predisposition is to say, here's how I think it should be, but I'm open to the possibility that I might be wrong. Now, that's a very hard thing to do because you teach it to your children. And then around the age of 15, your kid comes to you and says, I think that your notion of what time my bedtime should be and how often I should have access to the car and my allowance and, all are negotiable. And then you realize what? Shut up, kid, okay? Because you're still a kid. But when an adult comes to you and comes with a cogent argument, look, I sit at the JCC, right? We've got 3,500 families. That's a lot of people, okay? Every day somebody comes to tell me what? One of two things.
Plain.
What's wrong?
The pool is too hot or the pool is too cold.
Well, that's
A day,
interesting in the same.
a day, it's like a sanctuary, right? A day doesn't go by and I have a little marking in my office of how many times. It's been at least once a day, every single day that I've been to the JCC. And there are certain things that you can always count on. It's probably true in the shul too. Sermon was too long, sermon was too short, the chazan was good, the chazan was bad, off key, on key, too hot, whatever it is, that's the reality of life. In the end, if you spend your time thinking about it, right, your job is to try to appease people to the best of your ability. And sometimes it's okay to say, okay, I hear you, we agree to disagree. Okay, so I want to make sure to go back to this and say, we're never going to get this 100% right. We're going to do the best that we possibly can with humility and say, this is what I believe. And by the way, just remember, right, Hillel and Shammai, Hillel and Shammai in the Talmud, right? You know how many arguments Hillel and Shammai have?
Hundreds.
Nope. Hillel and Shammai
Oh, themselves?
themselves, 5, maybe 6, 5. You know how many arguments Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai have? The
That's
children of, the students of?
That's
Hundreds. Why is that? Why is that? Because when you're Hillel or Shammai and you say something, you've earned the gravitas to say what it is that you said and people will listen, right? Look, think about it. You've had great rabbis in this synagogue. And the rabbis that you really respect, when they would give you Eitzah Tovah, good advice, you would listen. Why? Because they had earned the right to make those pronouncements over the course of time. Because more often than not, they were right, or they were kind, or they were generous, or whatever it is that you appreciate, right? And more often than not, they were successful. That's why you have a successful synagogue, a successful leadership. Does that mean you agree with every decision or every comment, right? In fact, I don't think your rabbis or your teachers want you to agree with every comment. I'm sure many of you are agreeing with my comment about this one, right? But the point is that what? I don't want you to be automatons. I want you to be people who are thinking and refracting the text to the tradition and growing and reading and doing as Mr. Platt has done, who's probably read some other commentaries before he came to this class to prepare himself, or at least read the text in advance so that he was prepared to have an honest conversation or an intellectual conversation or an intelligent conversation, not intellectual, at least an intelligent conversation, which, by the way, is one of the nicest parts of being here because there's intelligent conversation. Okay, other comments? Yes. Did you want to say something?
Too many, I forgot. it.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, we're going around, yeah.
All right.
Keep going.
Poel Paro.
Yes,
I don't,
Hebrew 4.
unlike a lot of other people in the Talmud especially, I am not going to quote the rabbi that quoted the rabbi that quoted the rabbi where this came from. I
Right.
don't remember where this came from, but it was this week.
Mhm.
I don't think it was your article. It was something I read.
It was something
some other
good.
Class
Yeah, okay.
that said that this Poel Paro was not only just go to him, but to actually enter his inner chamber without permission.
Right, that was me.
That was you.
But it didn't come from me, it comes from the Zohar. Right,
See?
the book of Jewish, greatest book
I-
of Jewish mysticism says, when you're entering means entering to the deepest place. In other words, when you have a conversation with somebody, you can have a conversation on a very surface level. But just by show of hands, how do people believe they've actually had like a real heart to heart with somebody, really deep conversation? Never?
Yeah.
Over the course of your lifetime? Sure. Okay, and some of those conversations happen with people that you know well. Some of them happen just happenstance and not well. It just happens to be a deep conversation. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I thirst for more of those conversations because most of the conversations are about the weather or about sports, right? Or the pool temperature, right? Like, and by the way, sometimes people come to talk to me not because they have anything important to say, it's because they want to talk to somebody. But yes, go on. So
No,
yes,
so that was the point I was trying to make, is that I think that's why I think I don't know if it's Bo or I don't know if it's come or go, but it was a deeper thing than just walking over.
right. By the way,
That was the point I wanted.
did you ever think about the possibility that he uses the word bow because he wants to have both come and go? That there are two things happening at the same time, right? You are going onto Pharaoh and you are coming onto Pharaoh. What does that mean? Yeah, it energizes, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I was thinking in terms of the idea that God is everywhere and that God is saying you can come because when you get there, I'll be there.
Right, which by the way, for the Egyptians is what?
Going, leaving.
Right, because the Egyptians thought that the God that they were in front of at that moment in time was the God that they were serving. That's why there's so many gods, right? One of the messages here is a beautiful message, which is what? Wherever you go, come or go, God is there. But think about the notion of coming and going. It's both. When you're coming and you're going, what is he saying to them, right? Bo el paro, when you're coming and you're going, understand that you're never alone. There's somebody with you. I'm on your shoulder when you go in, when you go out, when you go in, when you go out. And the whole message here is Moses, get off, this trip of being so humble, right? And start to do the work that needs to get done because we're counting on you. And P.S., this is the whole uplift of Moses and the whole uplift of the children of Israel, who saw themselves as what? Remember in the desert, what did they call themselves? They met the giants, and what did they say?
Grasshoppers.
We were grasshoppers, and so we appeared in our own eyes. They looked like they thought we were grasshoppers, but guess what? We thought we were grasshoppers. And when you think you're a grasshopper, then it's all lost. You shouldn't see yourself as a grasshopper. Okay, people.
When you see the.
Yeah, I see some other people, yeah.
When you see the picture of them bringing back the grapes.
Yeah.
If that thing was really one bunch of grapes,
right?
Yeah, they were grasshoppers.
Oh, they were. But here's the issue. You could look at very big things and not be what? Not see yourself as a grasshopper. You could see what? Aren't I fortunate? Look, I know most of us go into edifices that are huge and beautiful. You walk into your sanctuary and you feel for a moment the majesty of the world, don't you? That's why there's so many purples and colors. It's very beautiful. When I walk in your sanctuary, I feel the uplift. By the way, especially I notice when you change the parochets, when you change the curtains, I find it to be very, very beautiful. I've actually never seen it in any other synagogue other than Rosh Hashanah, right? Switching to white. Here you have for different holidays. It's beautiful. You walk in, you feel the majesty, okay? Part of the problem is that there are people who walk into that space and are nonplussed. And you know what? I'm worried not
Because they
about.
only come on holidays. And they think
Maybe that's
all-
it, but I'm worried about people of that sort. I'm people who go to the Acropolis and are not moved by the Acropolis, right? There are people who go to places in the world and, it's one more place. It's when we take our kids when they're too young, right, to great places in the world. And what did they do? Like I did, I went to the Acropolis with my parents and I decided I had to make a pishy. And I decided I pulled down my pants right there and made a pishy. That's what my parents, right? On the Acropolis, I assisted in the destruction of the Acropolis, right? But so, I tell that story only because I wasn't old enough to appreciate what I was looking at. And by the way, it's not only a matter of age. Sometimes we're not sophisticated enough to understand what we're looking at, the great gifts that are in front of us. And I say sometimes to people, particularly at a time of sadness or simcha. I was just at a wedding. I did a wedding in Chicago, and it was so damn cold. But they had on both sides Zetas. One was 97 and one was 98. And they each walked down the aisle at the wedding. Okay? Come on. Isn't that an awesome moment at 98 to be walking your kids down? Right? And it was really very special for everybody. And I was standing there, and it was a wonderful, beautiful couple. They're as young as can be, and they're wonderful and sweet and stupid and, all the things that kids are at that stage and in love. But I was moved by what? The fact is that the Zetas and the Babas were able to walk down, right? And that to me was an amazing moment in time. Okay, a couple of more comments.
Nelson up there.
Nelson.
I think part of what's so amazing about all this is that God doesn't just make them into everybody, the Hebrews, the Jews, Moses, into puppets and set them up and put them on to keep going. He tries to get them involved in doing it to each other and involved as participants in their own lives.
Right. Actors in their own drama. Right? Actors in their own drama. And by the way, if I could say to anybody, any blessing I would like to give you is that you're an actor who controls the destiny of your own drama. And by the way, sometimes we create drama, which is good. And sometimes we mitigate drama, which is also good. But the notion of feeling that you are not only a master of your own destiny, but you're playing a bit role in a movie that you're the star of is actually quite a wonderful way in which to think of our lives. Okay, last comment before we go. Two more comments. Go ahead, please, Rebbitzin. And then we'll have Mr. Platt.
two things in answer to Elliot. There are times where you will translate something and the kids will, and then someone will come back to the rabbi or the teacher and say, is this really so? And the rabbi or teacher will say, not exactly. This happens a lot at Hebrew Academy with Orthodox rabbis. They will admit, well, we're not sure. That's
Yeah.
one thing. The other thing is that there is a thing in language called pejorative, pejorative, and make it ameliorate. That
Yeah.
words change their meaning. So it's the word bow, and we're just looking at the English.
Right, right.
And what bow meant when the people who wrote the book meant, may not quite be. That's the whole beauty of the Bible, that it's up to us to decide on the meaning, but it does change from generation to generation.
Which I think is a beautiful comment and also means that it's somehow eternal because
Right.
it has the possibility of having new meanings in new times. Okay,
What
last
is the
comment before we,
word, the word that one of the presidents used, short shrift or something. There was some word that was considered sort of a dirty word, and now everybody,
Right,
it's
there's a
only
lot of
three
words
little
now
same
in
words.
the English language that people are utilizing publicly that I have found to be very distressing, particularly in the political discourse as of late, that people are kind of stooping to a level of the use of language that's quite disturbing to me personally. We talk about lashon nekiah, clean language, right? As opposed to what's called nibul peh, which is a utilization of your mouth and your words to say things. Now, there are moments in time to use strong words. There's a reason for it, but I don't think we need to stoop to a level of, that crass and base language. Okay, yes, Mr. Platt, go ahead.
We have to realize that there's already been 7 plagues, and they're intensifying as they go along in force. So
Right.
it's really God, obviously, that's choreographing all of this,
Right.
orchestrating all of this. I mean, Moses and Aaron and the rest are, it's important that they gain confidence and that they move forward. But in reality, this is God's show completely. It's not until after they leave Egypt that they begin really. They're required then to have chutzpah, to courage, to act on their own. Not now. I think we're overplaying.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're bringing God back into the conversation. I'll just say one thing. Abraham Joshua Heschel once said that God is the most tragic figure in the Bible. God is the most tragic figure in the Bible. And I want you to keep that in mind, because I know we want to go to the transcendent place of God being the powerful puppeteer and all this other kind of stuff. And maybe God set this in motion. I just want to put out in front of you kind of an intellectual challenge. Do you think that God can create a world that God cannot lift?
Yes.
And the consequence of the answer to that question is very important for us in this day and age. And I think the message that I want to go with, particularly with that point, is can we create a reality in our world where we've gone so far down or in a particular direction or down the tubes, is what I really want to say, that we can't extricate ourselves from where we are. And what I worry about is I think about contemporary realities and really contemporary realities. What about climate change? How far down this hole have we gone? When I talk about what's going on in the way in which people speak with one another, and I don't only mean here, and it's not a political statement about Democrats, or Republicans, it's about the way in which the discourse takes place in our country, right? How people are so at each other, the way in which people are communicating with one another, the kind of language that's being used, the kind of vitriol that we see as common parlance. It drives me absolutely crazy. So I want to be very careful, even though I know you want to be a careful reader of the text. I think there may be an uber message here, a meta message here that we need to see. And that meta message is that in the final analysis, God, even though God can create a world that God can't lift, God allows for us to engage and involve in the process of what you all know the word. It's the most important word in liberal Judaism. Tikkun olam. To repair the world. And when I mean to repair the world, I'm not talking about giving tzedakah or giving clothes. Those are all important things to people who need clothes. I'm talking about tikkun olam, of literally changing the trajectory of the world. Because if the world continues in the trajectory in which it's going, we're going to be off tsaras, we're going to be in trouble, but we're out the cockers already by and large. We're old people. I'm worried about our kids and I'm worried about my grandkids. And I don't even have grandkids yet, as far as I know, right? And I think what I worry about is what is the stage that we are setting for the future? And I think, Mr. Platt, the conversation that we should be having is, what world did God want to lay out for the children of Israel and their nemesis, the Egyptians, at that moment in time? What was that world? What were the operating procedures? What were the standard operating procedures by which the world was going to work? And part of it was that we will have miracles, and we will have moments of nisim v'niflaot, all kinds of pyrotechnics that God's going to create. But in the final analysis, as the old saying goes, it's in your hands, right? It's in your hands. And if you want to really see what's going to happen, Moses says, nushoin, go forward, do the work that needs to be done. And in fact, you are not what you are, but what you might be. We are always a little bit ahead in terms of our essence of who we are as people than what we find ourselves, right? We have more potential to succeed and achieve than we even know ourselves. But what's it going to take? It's going to mean, you know this great story? Do you remember the story of the daughter of Pharaoh, right? Bitya, she's identified, right? And she can't reach the basket where Moses is. And what does the Midrash say? She became Plastic Man. Remember Plastic Man? Rubber Man. And what? Her arm actually stretched out, right? Now, wait a second. They didn't know about this back then. What do you mean? It's not possible that the hand stretched out, right? Have you ever done something that's beyond your ability? Sure, you have. And by the way, it's one of the reasons that our teachers and our parents push us. Sometimes and our gym instructors push. I have to talk about the JCC. We push you right beyond your limits so that you can have new limits. But that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is we become very, very reliant on what we've already done, not what we might yet do. Okay.
So now that you got past the prologue, do you have anything you want to teach us?
No, I hope you learned something today. Yes. I got a couple of questions here. Yeah.
And then his last point
His last point, yeah.
of your last point
My last point.
of Tikkun Olam, and maybe we are going down the tube too far. The comment is that many people think that human ingenuity can solve and will solve every problem in the world. Just look at history. And it makes sense.
Makes sense. So you believe in humans? You believe in humans?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, I believe in humanity. I really do. But I worry about when people don't act like humans. When people act like behemoths, when people act like animals in the worst sense of the word, then I worry about people's humanity. There are people who have lost their humanity. And I see us on the precipice of losing the humanity that which is all instilled within us. We say it every morning. Elohai neshama shenatata bi. God, you implanted a soul within me. You created it. You planted it within me. You're going to take it back from me at the end of time, which means it's eternal, and it goes back to the source of all souls. What a great gift. But do I sully it in my reality here, or do I utilize it for what it was intended to do? Last comment, then we have to go over here. Yeah.
Rabbi, you've said a lot since what I'm going to refer back to.
Yeah, sure.
I was quite moved about your stepping out of your own reality at this wedding.
Yeah.
To observe the people in their later 90s who walked down the aisle. That somehow moved you. And something I've thought about for quite a while is right in front of this building is a beautiful piece of artwork.
Yeah.
That I suspect people have come here thousands of times.
Never
but
seen.
they walk right by it, and that is the River Jordan with that flowing water. Each of us can cross the River Jordan. I just wondered how many people who are regulars here have no awareness of that piece of art right in front of this building.
By the way, the other day I walked around the JCM there. I just had my first anniversary. They didn't fire me yet. And I looked outside and I said, I don't really know all the history of all the pieces of art. I don't even know the history of the people the buildings are named for. I know some of them, but I don't know all of them. I think it's about time that I learned those things. And by the way, that should be our goal. Our goal should be what? To notice things, By the way, the worst thing that we have, the worst gift that we have and the best gift that we have is sight. Because sight, you know that your eyes are not very good at seeing what's really there. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Any ophthalmologist will tell you. What do you see? You see what you think you see, what your
Yeah.
brain knows that you see, right? Your eye itself does not see well. It's seeing with a different kind of lens. And I would say the same thing is true in this story, but not about the eyes. It's about the heart. It's softening or hardening the heart that really is the issue here, which, by the way, in the ancient world wasn't the seat of love. It was the seat of emotion in general. Okay? In general, we want a heart. Give us a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone, say the prophets. Because when you have a heart of stone, you can't really feel. Okay, I want to show two more things and then I got to go read some Torah. Okay, so we have the 10 plagues on the first page. I just want to show you what happens here. When they talk about the 10 plagues in the Torah, here's what it does. It does what? The blood is supposed to make you chazak, which means what? Strong. Frogs are supposed to make you kaved. What is kaved?
Heavy.
Heavy or honored, right?
COVID.
Then it says, right? Then it says gnats is one more time is chazak, right? Flies do what? Kaved, right? Dead livestock, kaved. Boils, chazak. Hail, kaved. Locust, chazak. Darkness, chazak. Firstborn die, chazak. What's interesting here? Each of the plagues is what? Is attributed to doing what? Doing a certain kind of uplift. And there are different kinds of uplift. One is strength. One is kaved, weightiness or heaviness, right? So you see the difference? And these are different kinds of things that are happening. So sometimes when you're involved in a situation, it alters who you are, but in a way that maybe you didn't expect. Not every experience is supposed to make you do X, right? Sometimes it's supposed to make you do Y. And one of the problems in reading the story of the Exodus from Egypt is that what? We just simply read the story and we read it in a language that we know, which is wonderful. You should read it in a language that you know. And we miss out on the nuances of what might be the difference between a plague that leads you to what? To chazak, and a plague that leads you to kaved. In other words, strength versus weightiness. So just take a moment. What's the difference between strength and weightiness? It says, kaved et avicha v'et imecha.
Strength.
Your parents should be weighty in your eyes. What does that mean? It does mean important, but what's the difference between that and they should be strong in your eyes? Remember when you were a kid, my dad is the strongest. My dad's stronger than your dad, right? That kind of notion of what? Of sheer power, right? But does your parent want to be weighty in your eyes or does your parent want to be strong? 1 second. Okay, so you want to say respect. I know but you're giving me what you want, right? And what we want. But I want to make sure that we understand that what's happening in the Torah is the Torah wanted each of these plagues to do something. Do something to Pharaoh and the Egyptians and Moses and the children of Israel. And if you go through the story and you know that what's supposed to happen in the plague of blood is that it's supposed to be chazak, does it change what you think about that particular plague? Or as opposed to kaved, right? Why? Why would you have the two? And I think it's important to understand something in nuance here in the text, which is that nuance is really important. Nuance is king. Nuance is really what the Torah wants you to look at. That's why they use different words at different times. It's not like English, you know? English hates the repetition of language, right? If you write very, very, I love you very, 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 very much, right? What does your English teacher do? Red pen and crosses out 9 of the 10 varies, okay? Maybe even all the varies. But in Hebrew, they love both alliteration, right? To hear it. And they also love repetition. Repetition gives strength, right? Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun. How many times do we do that?
3.
Erech Hapai. We do it 3 times. And everybody comes to shul and says, the service would be like 1/3 shorter if what? We didn't have all those Adonai, Adonais, right? There's a reason for it being there. The question is, are we sensitive enough to appreciate the reason that it's there? Okay, I'm not sure that we are. Part of it has to do with the fact that it's a language that we don't understand. And part of it is what? Part of it is what?
Times. The
What?
times that in other words, how we interpret it in relationship to the time that we live in.
Right. And by the way,
Things
you know,
mean different, again, they mean different things at different times.
I also want to ask you, do you all remember a time? I'll give you a great example of this. My Rabbi Emeritus of blessed memory, Bernie Lipnick, was a wonderful, wonderful rabbi. And he came back and he was at my side to support me. It was one of the greatest love affairs. I don't think I had a day where I ever angry at him, and I hope he never had a day he was angry at me. And I always called him rabbi in public, and he always called me rabbi in public. And whenever he talked to me personally, he said, "Hi, it's Bernie, not rabbi," right? Like, it was such an amazing thing. And I remember being with him, and you know, he used to have this voice, and he used to have a certain kind of command of people. And one time I'm sitting with him in shul, and a guy comes over to him and says, "Rabbi," and he says, "Call me Bernie." I learned so much about him in that moment in time, right? What was he trying to do? The person was obviously in trouble. The person was obviously sad. What was he trying to do? He was trying to break down the barrier in a certain kind of way to make him feel comfortable and at ease so that he could have a conversation and feel like he was what? Talking to a chaver, talking to a friend, as opposed to talking to somebody who was highfalutin. Wait, how are we doing inside there?
We're on the second meeting.
Oh, I gotta get going because
You're fifth.
I'm fifth. Let me just finish with one little thing here, okay? Look at the last page for a moment. Okay, this is Eric Fromm. Okay? What the biblical text stresses here is one of the most fundamental laws of human behavior. Every evil act tends to harden man's heart. Sorry for the language, but he was a man of his time. That is, to deaden it. Every good act tends to soften it, make it more alive. The more man's heart hardens, the less freedom does he have to change. The more he is determined already by previous action. But there comes a point of no return when a man's heart has become so hardened and so deadened that he has lost the possibility of freedom, when he is forced to go on until the unavoidable end, which is, in the last analysis, his own physical or spiritual destruction. So I leave you with the following message as I run into the shul to read the fifth aliyah. Here's the job. Soften your heart, open your heart, make your heart available to learning, growing, and softening itself so that you have the possibility of growing and not deaden yourself. And by the way, this is complicated. We could all go around the room. Have you ever been in a situation where you put somebody out of your life totally?
Yeah.
Out of necessity? You feel it. How does that feel, carrying the burden? Does it enliven you or does it deaden you to have mortal enemies to that point? I think one lesson we can learn here is the possibility of opening our hearts even to those people who have offended us and hurt us. And even those people we've put sort of in the timeout, it may be time for timeout to end and for us to bring people back into the camp. Remember what happens to people who are impure in Jewish tradition? They live outside the camp, but only for a period of time. Even if only for a period of time, and then they come back. And even people who thought that they killed somebody by accident, they go to what? A city of refuge, and they stay there for a period of time, but they don't stay there forever. Nobody always in the penalty box and stays in the penalty box forever. I'm going to go, or I'm going to be in the penalty box. Shabbat shalom. So nice studying with you.